In the silent shadows of Apache Ridge, a woman lives with unanswered questions until 5 young warriors return carrying her father's missing medicine bag. What they bring isn't just an object, it's a key to a forgotten identity. This story will haunt you. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. For 13 years, Willa Gray lived alone at the foot of Apache Ridge, in the same timber-framed cabin her father built with calloused hands and stubborn hope. He had died there beneath those old pine beams sometime in the fall of her 20th year, his breathing ragged and his last words whispered in a language she barely understood. Her mother had gone before him, taken by fever years earlier, and so the cabin became a house of ghosts, warmed only by the wood stove and the occasional memory that hurt less than the others. Willa rarely went down to town, not since the day. The sheriff handed her a folded flag and told her that her father's war days had finally caught up with him. But it wasn't the war that claimed him. It was something slower, deeper, a wasting sickness that no doctor understood. But he insisted. Only his medicine bag could keep at bay. When he died, the bag was gone. Stolen, he had said with cracked lips, stolen by someone who never knew what it really held. And Willa, bound by grief and loyalty, stayed behind, waiting for a sign that the old man hadn't been entirely forgotten. On a summer evening when the sky glowed red behind the ridge, that sign arrived. 5 riders crested the horizon, silhouetted against the burning clouds. Young warriors no older than boys, yet with eyes that had seen more than most men. There, ponies kicked up silence as they approached, and Willa watched from her porch, the wind pressing her dress flat against her knees. One of them held something wrapped in buffalo hide, stained and aged by time. Her breath caught in her throat before she even saw the strap of blue beads, the unmistakable mark of her father's hand. They didn't speak as they dismounted. Not at first. They only looked at her as if they knew the cabin, the land, and the pain that clung to her skin like sweat. And then the boy with the hawk feather braid stepped forward and held out the bundle. She didn't reach for it, not yet, because something in their silence told her this wasn't just a return. It was a beginning. But what had brought them here? After all these years? And how did they even know who she was? Why do you think the young warriors brought back the medicine bag now, and what secret might still be inside it? Share your theory in the comments below. Willa didn't remember walking forward, only the sharp ache in her knees as she stepped off the porch and onto the dust-hardened ground, her boots crunching softly over gravel that hadn't been disturbed in weeks. The boy with the hawk feather braid still held the medicine bag out in both hands, respectfully, reverently, like he knew what it meant to the woman standing before him. Her fingers hovered over it, hesitant, as if touching it too quickly might make it vanish or reveal something she wasn't ready to see. The beadwork was unmistakable. Her father had made it himself during his time among the mescalero, threading each blue bead with calloused fingers and stories he rarely told. He never said what was in the bag, only that it must never be opened, unless the time truly called for it. It's not for healing, he once told her in a raspy voice. It's for remembering. And now, 13 years later, it had returned not by mail or miracle, but by the hands of 5 silent strangers whose eyes were old with knowing. Where did you find it? Willa asked, finally daring to meet the boy's gaze. He didn't answer, not in words. Instead, he nodded toward the ridge behind them. In a hollow where no birds sing, said one of the others, quieter, older than the rest. It was buried beneath a fire pit, wrapped in songs we didn't recognize. The air grew still. Willa looked from one face to another, searching for something familiar. They weren't from any local band she remembered. Their clothes bore mixed patterns, Comanche stitchings, Apache featherwork, Navajo dyes. Travelers then, or messengers? Did he send you? She whispered, not even sure what she meant by he. Her father? A spirit? The past? The boy with the braid looked at her, his mouth a firm line, and shook his head. "No," he said. But he knew we would come. With trembling hands, she finally took the bag. It felt heavier than she remembered, like it carried more than herbs and charms, like it carried the weight of a life forgotten and the lives she never knew he touched. One of the younger boys stepped forward and pointed to the hills. "We can't stay," he said, "but you must open it where he first used it, by the 3 stones, before sundown tomorrow." Willa's blood ran cold. The 3 stones, she knew them well. A sacred place on the ridge her father always called the place of last breath. But he had forbidden her to go there, until now. She looked down at the bundle, then back at the boys. "Why me?" she asked. The wind answered first, rustling the pines behind the cabin. And then the hawk-feathered boy replied, voice barely, more than a whisper, because your blood remembers what your mind has forgotten. Willa sat at the table long after the boys disappeared over the ridge, their hoofbeats swallowed by the dry silence of the land. The medicine bag lay before her, resting on a wool cloth worn thin with age. She hadn't unwrapped it. Not yet. Something about its presence, its quiet, impossible return, filled the room with the weight of breath held too long. She lit the old lantern with shaking hands, and the light shivered against the log walls, bouncing shadows that reminded her too much of the nights spent listening to her father's slow breathing and strange half-assumed prayers in Apache tongue. He had never explained the full story, never connected the threads between his past in the army, his years among the mescalero, and the strange dreams that plagued him until death. She remembered one night, not long before he fell ill, when he told her, "There's a place beyond here that remembers every step we take. A place with stones that listen." She thought it was poetry. Now she wasn't so sure. She unrolled the drawer map he used to keep beneath his bed, ink faded, paper brittle with years. Her finger traced the edge of Apache Ridge until it found the 3 small marks, tiny dark circles drawn where no trail existed. 3 stones. He had written it in his left hand, jagged and slanted. Her father was right-handed. That alone chilled her. The bag pulsed with meaning, though her fingers had yet to open it. What did it hold? And why had it vanished from the cabin on the night he died, only to be buried and unearthed by 5 boys who spoke as if guided by ghosts? The wind groaned outside, stirring the curtains, and for a moment she thought she heard his voice again, soft, gravelly, almost pleading. "Don't open it where it's safe. Open it where it began." She pushed the bag away and stood pacing. She had lived 13 years between these walls, tethered by grief, waiting for something she couldn't name. Maybe this was it. Maybe the past had finally circled back to finish its story, but part of her still doubted. What if the bag held nothing, or worse, something she was never meant to see? She looked down at the map again, and then at the rifle. Leaning by the door, the boys hadn't said they'd return. They had simply delivered a burden and vanished. And yet something in their eyes had said this was far from over. Her gaze fell back on the bag. She didn't know if she would survive. What lay beyond the ridge? But she knew she couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. The past had come knocking, and it was time to walk into it. Dawn came in silence, as it always did in the high desert cold first, then golden. Willa rose before the light touched the trees, and saddled her father's old horse, Dust, who whinnied low with memory as she tightened the leather straps. Medicine bag hung at her hip now, swaying gently with each movement, an anchor from another world. She had packed light, a canteen, a strip of dried meat, a flint stone, and her father's journal, the one he never let her read while he was alive. She hadn't opened it yet, not last night, not ever. The sun had barely broken the horizon when she left the cabin, its porch groaning under her boots one final time. There was no one to wave her off, only the wind in the pines and the creak of saddle leather as she clicked dust into a steady pace north. The path to the 3 stones wasn't marked, Her father had warned her of that when she was a girl. "If a trail ever forms," he once said, "it means too many have walked it, and the place will no longer listen." So she followed instinct, memory, and the faint lines on the brittle old map, tucked now into her coat. For hours the ride was uneventful, rocky, sparse, interrupted only by the occasional lizard darting across the sand or the call of a hawk overhead. But something shifted as she crossed a dried riverbed etched deep into the land like a scar. Dust snorted and stopped mid-step. Willa felt it too, a tension in the air, like the earth holding its breath. She dismounted, letting the reins hang loose as she scanned the ridgeline. That's when she saw it. A raven, larger than any she'd seen, perched atop a flat stone formation not far off. It didn't caw, it didn't move. It only watched. Her heart thudded. Ravens were her father's symbol, always drawn in the corners of his journal, always appearing in the stories he half-whispered near sleep. "They carry memory," he used to say, "but only if you let them." She approached slowly, hand resting near the medicine bag, and the raven did not flee. Only when she reached the stone beneath its perch did it lift into the air with a single flap and vanish into the sun. Beneath the stone, carved faintly and nearly erased by time, was a single word etched in Apache syllables. She couldn't read it, but she knew its shape. It matched a sketch on the second page of the journal. Willa opened the book for the first time, fingers trembling. Inside the front cover was a drawing of a young girl beside 3 stones. And behind her, a man standing in shadow, wearing her father's hat. The caption below read, "She won't remember, but the stones will." The 3 stones rose from the earth like forgotten sentinels, jagged and towering, their surfaces carved with the erosion of wind and time. Willa stood at their center, the air around her oddly still, as though the world itself had hushed to a listen. She had walked the final mile on foot, leading Dust along a narrow ravine until the horse refused to go further. The path had disappeared beneath thorn and root, forcing her to climb the last ridge alone, each step scraping memory from the corners of her soul. The bag pulsed at her side, not with sound, but with weight, a pressure that didn't belong to this world. As she approached the first stone, a wind moved through the clearing, circling her like a slow dance. Pine needles lifted, dust swirled low, and the light shifted, catching on something etched into the base of the stone. She knelt, brushing away debris, revealing an old symbol she remembered from her father's faded sketches, 3 lines crossing at a center point. The mark of a memory place. The others were similar, though each bore a variation. One had a ring of tiny notches around it, another a spiral within the cross. She didn't know their meaning, not yet, but something deep inside her responded. Her breath came quicker as she drew the medicine bag into her hands. The buffalo hide was warm despite the wind. The blue beads gleamed in the shifting sun. With a steadying breath, she sat cross-legged in the center of the stones, as her father had drawn so long ago. She placed the bag before her and unwrapped it. Inside were not herbs or bones or charms as she expected, but folded papers, brittle, with age, stained with sweat and something darker. The first was a letter. Her name was written in the center in bold, uneven strokes. Willa. She opened it with hands trembling from something deeper than cold. It wasn't her father's handwriting. It was unfamiliar, jagged, broken, but the message was clear. If you are reading this, then the others are already watching. The stones are not just stones. They remember voices, names, mistakes. You carry one. Speak it. Willa blinked, heart pounding. The others? Who? The boys? Spirits? Her father? She looked around, expecting movement, but the ridge remained still. Then she heard it low and distant, a humming, like a song without words. It came not from outside, but from inside the stones, or inside her. She stood slowly, turning in a circle, holding the bag close. The air thickened. And then, like a breath behind her ear, a voice whispered her name. The whisper of her name didn't come again, but its echo lingered inside Willa like the memory of a dream that refuses to fade. She stood frozen, heart hammering, surrounded by a wind that had no source and an energy that pressed against her. Chest like grief made solid. The 3 stones had become more than stone. She could feel it now, each one humming at a different pitch, subtle and dissonant, like 3 voices speaking at once in languages long buried. She bent to gather the rest of the papers inside the medicine bag, unfolding them with care. They were drawings, mostly maps of the ridge from decades ago. Charcoal sketches of men she didn't recognize, one page torn nearly in half with only a single line scribbled in the center. She must speak what he could not. Beneath that page, almost hidden, was something heavier. A leather cord with a pendant carved from bone shaped like an open mouth, teeth bared. She didn't know what it was, but the moment her fingers touched it, the humming stopped. Silence crashed into the clearing like a wave. The wind ceased. Even the insects withdrew. Then she heard a breath, not her own, not human, but full and ancient. She spun around, expecting to find someone behind her, but there was no one. Only movement in the edges of her vision, shadows thickening between the trees, taking the shape of figures half-formed and slow-moving. They weren't solid. Not yet, but they watched. The letters rustled at her feet, caught in a circle of soft current, and in their motion a voice rose, not whispered, not ghostly, but hers. He didn't forget, the voice said, but he buried the truth. The pendant in her hand pulsed. Once, and without thinking, Willa placed it around her neck. Her knees buckled. She dropped to the ground, catching herself with one hand on the dry dirt between the stones. In that moment, her mind split, not broken, but peeled open. She saw her father not as the quiet, coughing man by the fire, but as a younger version, riding with warriors, kneeling at these very stones, blood on his palms, shouting a name into the dark. She saw a child, not herself, but someone else wrapped in cloth, passed from one set of hands to another under a moonless sky. And then she heard a word, a name, spoken in Apache, but she understood it. Tsatsane, Memory Keeper. The pendant burned warm against her skin. She looked up, eyes blurry with tears and dust. The figures at the edge of the clearing grew clearer now, not threatening. Waiting. She wiped her face and stood, voice shaking. "What do you want me to remember?" she asked aloud. The answer. Kin not in words, but in images, and one face, a woman. Her own face, but younger, different, and behind her, a 5th stone. Willa stared at the faint outline just beyond the clearing, her breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. The 5th stone hadn't been there when she arrived. She would have seen it, felt it. Yet now, half buried and glowing faintly. In the amber twilight, it pulsed like something alive, as if summoned from the bones of the earth. The shadows of the 3 original stones stretched toward it, merging at its base like tributaries feeding a forgotten river. The mist around her. Ankles thickened. For a moment, Willa felt a pressure behind her eyes, not pain, but expansion, like her skull was too small for the thoughts trying to enter it. She walked forward, each step tentative, drawn not by curiosity but by recognition. This wasn't just another stone. This was the one from her father's drawing, the one that stood behind the child who looked like her, but wasn't. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and brushed away dirt and moss. Beneath it, carved deep into the rock, was a series of concentric spirals, each layered with symbols she didn't understand, but somehow felt. The pendant around her neck warmed. Behind her, the air shifted. She turned. The shadow figures from earlier had drawn closer, no longer wisps on the edge of vision. They had formed now, older men and women, some in traditional dress, some bearing scars across eyes or chests, all watching in silence. But their attention wasn't on her, it was on the 5th stone. She knelt before it. The medicine bag lay at her feet, still open, its contents scattered by the wind and forgotten in the rising. Tension. She placed one hand on the stone and whispered, "Tsatsa ne." The air pulsed. The earth beneath her fingers hummed in reply. And then everything vanished. No sound, no light, no cold. Just memory. She stood suddenly in a different time. The trees were smaller. The ridge was wild and untouched. Smoke curled from fires in the valley below, and children's laughter carried on the wind. Her father stood at the edge of the stones, not sick, not old. Younger than she remembered him ever being. He wasn't alone. 5 riders stood with him, warriors painted and solemn. In his arms was a wrapped bundle. A child. A girl. Her. Or was it? Her father turned slowly and looked at where she stood, not through her, but at her. "You were never meant to carry this alone," he said, voice echoing as if through canyon walls. But no one else returned. She wanted to speak, to move, but the vision pulled away like fog in sun. She dropped to her knees, breath ragged. Around her the world returned, the stones, the shadows, the rising wind. The 5th stone still stood, glowing faintly, but now something else sat at its base. A second medicine bag, smaller, newer, with her initials carved into the clasp. The new bag was cold to the touch, cold like river stone in winter, not from the air, but from something deeper, older. Willa sat back on her heels, cradling it between her palms, her breath curling in the cooling air. Her initials were carved into the clasp, not sewn, not marked, but etched as if the bag had been made for her before she was ever old enough to hold a knife. The surrounding spirits had receded, their forms thinning into trees and breeze and silence once again. She was alone now. More alone than ever. And yet ... not. She opened the bag with slow fingers, half afraid of what it might contain. Inside were 3 things. A folded page sealed with a smear of wax, a bone whistle strung with eagle feathers, and a smooth stone carved with a spiral matching the 5th stone's face. Her hands shook as she opened the page. The ink was fresh, not aged like the others, and the handwriting was familiar. It was her father's. "If you've come this far, then the memory chose you. I could not carry what they showed me. I buried it in silence. But you, blood of the mescalero, bone of the wandering, that blood hears, that blood speaks, use the whistle. But only when the sky swallows light and shadow in equal measure. They will answer, all of them." Willa read the lines twice, then again, each time feeling something crack open inside her, like a seed exposed to sudden sun. Blood of the mescalero. He had never said that aloud, not once. But she remembered the looks in town. The way some folks paused when they saw her dark eyes and high cheeks. The way the preacher once stopped mid-sermon when she walked in with her hair braided. Her father had fought hard to shield her from something, an origin, a history, a name. But now the stones had pulled it all back. Her mother wasn't from the town. She wasn't even from this side of the border. And the girl in the vision, the one passed beneath moonlight, she hadn't just looked like Willa. She was Willa, or a version of her. A memory reborn. She turned the bone whistle over in her fingers. The eagle feathers rustled with the softest breeze. She didn't know what would happen when she blew it. She only knew the balance of light and shadow was drawing near. The sun was dipping below the ridge. The eastern sky was bruised with indigo. The moment was coming. As if drawn by some invisible tide, she stood again within the 5 stones. The first breath into the whistle felt heavy, like trying to summon a voice not her own. She paused, listened. The wind died. Time seemed to hesitate. And then she raised the whistle to her lips and blew. No sound came, not to her ears. But the ground responded. Far off in the distance, thunder rolled, not from clouds, but from hooves. 5 riders approached once again, but this time they were not boys, and they were not strangers. The thunder of hooves grew louder, not like a storm, but like a memory insisting on being remembered. Willa stood within the 5 stones, the whistle still warm in her hand, her heart racing with a fear that felt ancient, older than her body, older than her name. The riders crested the ridge just as the sun kissed the earth's edge, painting them in firelight. They moved as one, neither in haste nor in hesitation. Their horses didn't gallop. They walked with ceremonial stillness, their manes braided with river reeds and feathers, their flanks painted in earth tones and symbols Willa felt but couldn't name. As they drew near, she realized these weren't the same boys who had brought her father's bag. They were the echoes of something greater. Warriors, yes, but more than that. Guardians, keepers, messengers. The lead rider dismounted first, his moccasins touching the dust with no sound. He was tall, with shoulders carved by labor and a face that bore both kindness and authority. His eyes deep set and dark met Willa's with recognition. He removed a woven sash from across his chest and held it out. On its center was the same spiral as the 5th stone. "You have come when the veil is thinnest," he said in perfect English, though the cadence of his words carried the rhythm of drums. "And the stones remember you." Willa took the sash, unsure what to do with it. The man gestured toward the 5th stone. "That one was never meant to rise," he said. "It responds only to the return of what was broken." "What was broken?" she asked, voice trembling. "Your line," he answered. "Your name." The other riders dismounted in silence and formed a circle around the stones, their presence neither threatening nor passive. One of them, an older woman with silver streaks in her braids, stepped forward and held a small clay bowl. Smoke rose from it, sweet and bitter. "Your father was chosen to remember," she said, "but he buried it. And now the remembering has come to you." The man beside Willa nodded. "This place does not just store memory, it listens for truth." "Speak your truth, Willa Gray," her voice caught. She didn't know what her truth was, that she had lived in silence, that she had longed for answers he never gave, that she feared the blood inside her and honored it in the same breath. The wind picked up, stirring the smoke. Willa closed her eyes. "I am my father's daughter," she said. "And I am more than that. I carry his silence, but I will not let it become mine." The wind howled once, hard and sudden. The 5 stones glowed faintly. The pendant at her chest warmed, then cooled. A soft rumble passed beneath her feet, then stopped. The 5th stone pulsed, then cracked, not with violence, but with release. From within it, a sliver of carved wood emerged. A totem, a figure with wings and eyes shaped like hers. She picked it up, hands steady now. The warrior stepped forward. "Again, your memory has returned. But the circle is not yet closed." Behind her, the wind shifted once more, and a 6th rider approached from the shadows, slower than the rest, older, limping. A man wrapped in a soldier's coat, wearing her father's hat. Willa couldn't speak. Her mouth was dry, her hands frozen around the carved totem. The 6th rider stepped fully into the clearing, the worn soldier's coat clinging to his narrow frame, hat low over a face she hadn't seen in 13 years. But she knew it, every line, every scar. The limp, the calloused hands, the smell of pine and old smoke that drifted toward her like a memory dragged across time. "You're dead," she whispered. The wind carried her words to the edge of the stones and back again. The man didn't flinch. He removed his hat slowly, revealing silver-streaked hair and eyes the same storm gray as her own. "I was," he said simply. "But the stones keep what the world lets go." Willa stepped forward. "I buried you." He nodded. "You buried what remained. What grief left behind." Her knees weakened, but she didn't fall. "Why did you leave?" Her voice cracked. "Why did you let me believe?" "Because the memory was too heavy," he said, his tone thick with guilt. And I thought hiding it would protect you. Protect me from what? The warriors behind her watched in silence, their faces unreadable. Her father looked past her, toward the fifth stone, now dim once more. From yourself, he said. From the burden of a name divided between two worlds. I thought silence was mercy. It wasn't, Willa said. It was abandonment. His jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the dust. Then I was wrong. She looked up at him. You're here now, but why? He removed a folded paper from his coat and handed it to her. Because the circle wasn't closed. And it can't be until you choose what to remember and what to leave buried. She took the page and unfolded it. It wasn't a letter. It was a birth certificate, hers, but the name listed beneath Mother was not one she had ever known. It was Mescalero, a name tied to land, to blood, to people she'd never met, but had always felt in her bones. She didn't die, he said. They took her back. And I let them. Because I had no place among them, and I feared they'd take you too. Willa couldn't hold back the tears now. They fell silently. Her grip on the totem loosened, but she didn't drop it. She's alive? I don't know, he said honestly. But they've been waiting to tell you. He turned toward the riders. One of them stepped forward, one Willa hadn't looked closely at before. The older woman. Her eyes glistened, her jaw trembling. Child, she said, voice like dry leaves in wind. You do not need to find her. You are her. The words struck like thunder. Not metaphor, memory. Willa's knees gave out and she sank to the earth. The truth washing over her, not in a wave, but in a tide. She had been brought back to the ridge, not just to remember, but to return. The whistle had called them. The stones had opened. The silence her father left behind had been filled with truth. She was the child passed under moonlight. She was the keeper. And now she understood why the bag came back. She stood slowly, breath shaking but full. She looked at the man who had raised her and saw now not failure, but fear. She looked at the warriors and saw not strangers, but roots. Then she turned to the fifth stone, placed the totem on its base, and whispered, I remember. And this time, the wind didn't blow. The ground didn't tremble. The stones didn't hum. But something inside her shifted. The burden lifted. The silence broke. And the story, at last, was hers to carry forward.